Hello everyone and welcome to Be on Reddit.
Am I the a-hole for avoiding my childhood friend after she called me a beggar for living in my ex-husband's house? Original post. My 29 female ex-husband Carter, 27 male, and I divorced almost 4 years ago. He divorced me. I was blindsided because I thought we had a very happy marriage. Unfortunately, this year I was in a hit and run and was hospitalized. My insurance didn't cover much and they never found who did it. I drained my savings. I couldn't live in my apartment anymore since I could no longer physically walk up 5 flights of stairs. I had a job but was let go. I was struggling and it was a low point in my life. Carter and I hadn't kept in touch, but he contacted me and said that I could live in one of his spare rooms. I had no other options. I offered to pay him rent, but he refused. He has a maid for chores. I cook for him sometimes. It's okay, he's very chatty and bubbly, and if I close my eyes, I can pretend we're friends again, and we never took the leap into a relationship and a divorce. My childhood friend Claire called me to express sympathies that I couldn't find a place. I told her that I was living with Carter. She insisted on coming over as she also had been friends with him and had refused to take a side. When she arrived, Claire started to talk about how this was a bad situation. She asked me if I paid rent and I told her no. She said that this pity would end and asked if I wanted to be a beggar for the rest of my life. I told her I wasn't a beggar. She would tell our friends. I pleaded with her not to. Claire then said that if I didn't think what I was doing was wrong, I wouldn't have cared if she told everyone. I feel humiliated and ashamed. I've been avoiding her. She called me yesterday and said that I was being childish and emotionally manipulative for behaving that way. Am I the a-hole? Now for the comments. A Redditor says, not the a-hole. Your friend Claire is a busybody and is sticking her nose into your business where she does not belong. Her words were cruel and judgmental and likely inaccurate. You need to limit your contact with her and not feel that you have to defend your choice to anyone except yourself. OP replies, I'm not trying to be a beggar. I've offered to pay. I would even do chores and clean, but he has a housekeeping service. He eats takeout often, but he hasn't turned down any dishes I've offered him. That's the only way I can thank him. Another Redditor says, not the a-hole. She is. Who died and put her in charge? What you do is none of her business. OP says, Claire's always been very involved in what I do because she says I don't make the right decision like marrying Carter. She told me it wouldn't work out because he'd get bored of me and she wasn't wrong. She's held that as proof she knows better. A third Redditor says, if Claire is so concerned about you living with your ex, why isn't she offering to help you out? Instead of cutting you down and trying to make you think this is a bad decision, she should be helping you. The only person being emotionally manipulative is Claire. In my honest opinion, if your friends are being judgmental about your situation and they aren't offering other options, then they really aren't very good friends. OP, don't worry about other people's opinions of your current situation. They can't possibly understand unless they've gone through a similar situation. Just take care of yourself, heal, and continue to do your best to appreciate your ex for his generosity. P.S. You're not a beggar. You're a human in a difficult situation, and someone that actually cares about you offered to help you in your time of need. OP responds, she believes in everyone working hard for themselves and not asking for handouts. She said she could help me look for apartments or pass along my request for an apartment at ground level, but that's the extent of help. I have tried to show my appreciation for Carter and he's happy to hear it. He's told me I can stay for as long as I'd like or forever, but I can't wait to save up and find an apartment I can live with. He's too close and too affectionate with me. There's a part of me that still loves him, and he keeps poking those parts of my heart. The Redditor says, so let me get this straight. Claire, whose family has money and is married to a wealthy man, has the nerve to think other people should work hard for themselves and not ask for handouts? What a hypocrite. And Claire is not your friend. Friends do not kick a friend when they get hit by a car and are doing their best to pick themselves up and move on with their life. OP replies, Claire is privileged in many ways, but she's also very intelligent. I think it makes her believe that she would be successful regardless of what happened. But I'm also smart, and life dealt me a bad hand. I did the best I could. I lived frugally and saved money and followed all the rules, and yet all my hard work was wiped out. I can't try harder out of my situation. I can only try my best. Update more than 2 months later. A couple of days after my post, Claire reached out and apologized for using harsh words. I accepted her apology, but things were still uncomfortable for me. She said she found an apartment I could live in. It was on the first floor and had access to public transportation. The rent was high but not out of my budget. I would be living with 3 other people in the apartment. I checked it out and it was acceptable. I told Carter Claire had found an apartment for me and he flipped out. He said I couldn't live there because it was a dangerous part of town. We discussed it and came to a compromise. He would feel better if we went to a hotel in the area for a few days and see how dangerous it was. It was fine for the first few days, but one morning a man followed me. It was frightening. Carter said it was proof the area wasn't safe. I told him this was the only option I had for now, unless I wanted to go back to my parents' house and find a new job there or sleep on friends' couches. My parents live in a developing country and I don't speak the language well, so that is my last resort. Carter reminded me that he said I could stay as long as I'd liked. I told him I didn't want to be a burden on him anymore. It was very kind of him to offer, but I can't take advantage of his kindness indefinitely. He said Claire was putting thoughts in my head. I offered to pay him rent again and he finally agreed, but he deliberately wastes rent money on silly things to prove a point. I told him that, but he said if I didn't like it, I could stop paying or pay him another way. I dropped the conversation. Claire asked me why I hadn't moved into the apartment. I said I was paying rent to Carter and she chewed me out. Claire and Carter's social circles overlap, so Carter found out about how Claire was saying I chose to stay there even when she found me a new place to live. He got into an argument with me and said that I should stop talking to Claire. He made an ultimatum of him or Claire. I chose him. Since then, he's been very happy. I am happy to see how cheerful he is, but I can't handle the constant hugs or snuggles or pinching. It makes me feel bad and dredges up bad thoughts. I feel inadequate and crushed because he may be able to be platonic friends with me, but I still haven't gotten past the hurt. On a positive note, I started physical therapy and signed up for a free counseling program through my work. I have a tight budget, so I have to make do. Me, 27 female with my husband 31 male. Marriage counselor lied to us, plus 4-year update. Original post. My husband of 7 months and I had a rough time after we got married when he came back from military deployment. Screaming matches, erectile dysfunction, resentment from deployment, me feeling sexually unattractive, etc. We went to a military-funded marriage counselor for about 2 months before the therapist suddenly disappeared, saying he was getting transferred. Said he'd continue seeing us once a week, but suddenly his phone number changed and we had no idea what happened. We just stopped counseling altogether due to scheduling issues. Our last session was around February or so. I thought the marriage counseling helped as we'd be doing better, or so I thought. But apparently my husband is still unhappy, albeit for other reasons now. Our sex life still sucks, and I feel horribly unwanted and undesirable despite being fit and attractive. We had a fight last night, and finally the substance of our individual counseling came out for the first time. We were shocked, to say the least. So we had both individual and couples counseling. We'd meet around once a week as a couple and would alternate weeks individually. It came out last night. The counselor had been telling us individually that the problem was all the other's fault. He gave us both some of the same story but with some differences. He told us each that the other was being very closed off and defensive and not wanting to open up or discuss issues. That we were each blaming the other. This was while I was openly sharing with him my abandonment and anger issues and feeling insecure sexually and providing him with background info from my previous therapy sessions with other counselors. My husband claims he would try to offer stories from his past as well, but that the counselor would actually cut him off and say he wasn't the problem. He told my husband privately I may have BPD and likely needed meds. This coincides chronologically with my husband out of nowhere yelling at me during arguments that I needed medication. I asked our counselor if I should see a specialist after these fights, whether I really was showing these signs, and said honestly that I would seek more intensive help if he thought it would help our marriage. He laughed at my husband in individual sessions, saying there was nothing wrong with me, that my husband was deflecting by trying to diagnose me. Does he think he's a psychiatrist? He would laugh. He told me privately my husband was emotionally and sexually underdeveloped and would never have a healthy relationship, sexually or emotionally, with anyone without serious change, that I should move on, that he was not willing to change or admit to any issues and would run from all conflicts, that each time the counselor tried to broach issues, my husband would clam up and get defensive, that he didn't know what it truly meant to be married, and that he suspected there was something deeply rooted in my husband's past that was the root of all our problems, that my husband just needed more therapy. Note, we weren't paying for therapy, we got it free due to military benefits. He told me I was very smart and attractive and deserved a partner more on my level. My husband reports the counselor told him there was nothing wrong with him, that he was very mature and intelligent, and all our problems stemmed from my psychosis. The aftermath. I'm horrified by how many of our fights after the beginning of counseling were colored by his statements. I was treating my husband like a 13-year-old boy, and my husband kept telling me I needed psychiatric treatment. Our marriage has actually improved much after this time, but I now believe it's because I worked on my anger issues and gave my husband the benefit of the doubt, while my husband became a better communicator in arguments. My husband now has different issues with our marriage, but we're both still reeling from our conversation about the counselor last night and wondering what kind of harm it may have caused. I don't really know what I'm asking here. I had insomnia all night about this, and I just don't know what to do. Edit. Direct question. Should I report the counselor, and what are the suggestions for how to move forward with my husband in this? TLDR, the marriage counselor told each of us the marriage problems were all the fault of the other, told us separately that I was a psychotic witch and that he was emotional sexual equivalent of a 13-year-old boy. Wondering how much harm this has caused. Unsure what to do. Now for the comments. A Redditor says, "Man, that is some Dr. Lecter nonsense. I hope you can get his license yanked." Another Redditor says, "Jesus, what the hell is wrong with this guy? His job is to fix relationships. He's doing the exact opposite. This is something out of an M. Night Shyamalan film." Another Redditor says, "What would happen during the joint sessions? How did he manage to maintain the two sides of the story simultaneously?" OP responds, "He would request an update of our status since last meeting. We would both give our perspectives on the latest fight or on why we thought we resolved an issue successfully. Then he would provide suggestions, but a lot of it seemed fluffy. I always resented him not confronting my husband on his issues, and I now know my husband was angry the counselor wasn't suggesting I get evaluated for BPD. Honestly, I did have issues with rage, and he didn't help me at all even when I tried to bring them up individually. I read a lot of self-help books specific to managing anger and did a lot of introspection and practiced techniques on calming down. I also read some books on marriages. Our relationship has improved greatly, but I think it's because both my husband and I did a lot of self-help. I have no idea what couples incapable of such introspection and self-awareness would have done with someone like him." Another editor says, "By law, aren't therapists supposed to keep notes or recordings of each session?" OP responds, "There were no notes. He explained it was all kept confidential as per military policy. This made sense to me at the time because a lot of military veterans don't want documentation that might hurt their careers and such. So he explained it as a policy issue meant to encourage soldiers to attend counseling instead of bottling it all up." OP gives additional info. "I feel so stupid. I felt like something was off. I didn't include this in my post, but he would propose strategies for getting my husband to come out of his shell at the next joint session. but he wouldn't follow through. My husband says he said the same thing to him and would be flabbergasted at joint sessions when the counselor did a 180 on him. Update. So this is an update more than 3 years later. I hope this is allowed. I used a throwaway and don't remember my password. A lot happened since then, and it occurred to me that maybe I should post an update in case anyone here was around for that. Summary. I was the wife who was seeing a marriage counselor with my husband, both jointly and individually. Things were only getting worse and worse, and it was only after a blow-up fight that my husband and I compared notes and realized the counselor had been feeding each of us lies. Counselor was telling me that my husband was emotionally 12 years old and would never be capable of a relationship, while reassuring my husband all was well with him. Meanwhile, he was telling my husband I had borderline personality disorder and needed medication. When my husband started accusing me of being mentally ill, I brought this up to the counselor, who then began making fun of my husband for saying such a thing. Does he think he's a psychiatrist or something? He actually laughed. Counselor reassured me that I was a beautiful and intelligent woman and would do great once I left my husband. The counselor, who was provided by the military through their family services, ended up being transferred a few weeks after we discovered this. We couldn't figure out if he got canned for abusing some other couple, if he retired, or some other shenanigan. Well, fast forward to today. My husband and I are doing great now. We went on a vacation, both of us changed jobs, moved, and we are very happily married now 4 years later. We travel, adopted a couple of kitties, and bought a house in a place we both love. How we got here? We both read some self-help books, started giving each other the benefit of the doubt, got better at communicating. I left my super high-stress job, he changed careers, and everything sort of did a 180. Funny enough, my old job had been killing me, and when I had mentioned to counselor that I thought maybe I should find another job since it was so dysfunctional, he protested against it. My husband and I did not report him at the time. We were concerned he would retaliate against my husband in some way, as my husband was in the armed forces for a year and a half after all this. I'm embarrassed that we did not report him. We were scared and overwhelmed. I'm considering calling that base's family services now and filing an official report. Not sure if it will matter, so much time has passed. That's all really. You all were such a great help then. I thought I might as well post this in case anyone around here remembered. P.S. I thought to post this after we watched an M. Night Shyamalan movie recently. One of the commenters had mentioned this sounded like a film he'd make. I still laugh at that comment years later, so thank you. TLDR, husband and I are happily married 4 years after Psycho Dr. Lecter wannabe pulled an M. Night Shyamalan. Now for the final comments. OP here, it's hard, but I actually ended up seeing another licensed and well-reviewed therapist when I lost someone very important to me. This counselor was wonderful and really helped us. I did my research and paid out of pocket for her. She was an angel and worth every penny. I think finding a good therapist is a lot like dating. There are some crazies, some a-holes, and some you just don't click with. Also, maybe you get what you pay for, and Dr. Lecter was free with the military. She mentions in another comment, it really would. The one good thing Dr. Lecter did was tell me, your husband says some stupid things in arguments. He doesn't actually mean to hurt you. This blew my mind because, as someone very good with words, I couldn't understand how someone could say such hurtful things without harboring malice. But I followed his advice and was more patient when my husband would say something ridiculous. Also, finding a new job helped me a ton. I didn't recognize how much of a nervous wreck I was thanks to that God-forsaken office. I became much more even-keeled overnight. This did wonders. He provides her perspective on why the counselor played games. I've thought a lot about it. I think he was honestly at the end of his career and decided we were both good people with personal issues that brought out the worst in each other. My hypothesis is he didn't want to do the work and figured he'd just get us to break up and move on with our lives, rather than take months to get us to realize we were just incompatible. But yeah, I decided to call the base Monday and report. A Redditor comments, I guess I just assumed it was this way everywhere, but every individual counselor and couples counselor I've ever spoke to was adamant that they wouldn't cross over. If they were your individual counselor, they were your individual counselor and would not become your couples counselor because it crossed a professional boundary and vice versa. Is that not typically the case? Another Redditor replies, yes, that's considered best practice. There's another reply for another Redditor that says, yup, that's my understanding as well. Although it sounds about right for the military to say they don't have the budget for multiple therapists to be available.
That was the end of the video. Comment down below to share what you thought. Press like and subscribe and click the notification bell for more regular updates. Thank you for watching.